the speaker is exercising the discretion as a big bad bully in order to prove himself that I am the man.
The members of the opposition walked in, walked out, walked in, walked out of the house. If we are there to discuss the budget, as you say, it's a very important. That's what I started this conversation with Kellon with. The importance of the estimates of revenue and expenditure, right? We ought to take this as a serious discussion, a serious debate. We ought to take the parliament as a place where serious business happens. And you're correct. When I was in the Senate under your leadership, Senator Humphrey, we could not have gotten away with those things.
We will be making sense of the Speaker's handling of the conclusion of debate on Grenada's 2025 budget in the lower house of Parliament last week. Now, having returned from their lunch, Finance Minister Dennis Cornwall stood up to close the debate. Now, at the time he was speaking, both Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell and members of the opposition were absent from the chamber. It must be noted that at the commencement of Cornwall's contribution, Dr. Mitchell was the lone member of the lower house who did not contribute to debate on the budget. Now, during Cornwall's presentation, the Speaker then proceeded to call him to his bench and subsequently brought the Parliament to recess. His explanation was that if he allowed the member for St. Patrick East to continue speaking, then that would have precluded both members from St. David and St. George Northwest, respectively, from contributing to debate on the budget. Now, upon resumption of the recess, the Prime Minister entered the chamber and proceeded, following the Speaker's announcement of his inability to reach Dr. Mitchell, to assert his prerogative to close the debate instead of the Member of Parliament for St. Patrick East, who initially stood up to close the debate. It was then that an interaction ensued in Parliament following the return of the members of the opposition who objected to the Prime Minister closing the debate, following the Speaker's ruling on the issue. And of course, the opposition's objection here had to do with Standing Order 40, which speaks to opening and closing motions on debates in the House. And of course, here to make sense of this, of course, is former Senator herself, former Senator Dr. Tessa Sincere, who has been on the Bub Report before. But I want to preface this by making the point that Dr. Sincere is here in her personal capacity, and she's not representing the political party with whom she is now associated. She's here as someone who sat, of course, on what is called the Standing Orders Committee of the Parliament, of the previous Parliament, that is before 2022. Of course, Dr. Sincere sat with former Senator Chester Humphrey on that committee. And so the reason why she was brought here is because she has familiarity with the standing orders of the House. And I understand, Dr. Sincere, that you also prepared many youth parliamentarians in the work of the House. So let's start there about your experience with the standing orders of the House as the premise for this conversation.
Good morning, Kellen. Good morning to all listeners and viewers. Happy Sunday to everybody. It's always a pleasure to be on the Bob Report and to engage in these sorts of conversations. Yes. I am really happy that you decided to delve into this, and particularly to make mention of, my experience training the youth parliamentarians, the national youth parliamentarians, for debate. Now, it's kind of important for us, and I want to use this as an opportunity for education as well, for learning.
And that's what we try to do. It's all about, for us, it's all about education as well. Yes. So
beautiful.
Proceed.
And yes. I think, Helen, all of us need to have, I actually have a copy of this. This is the standing orders of the House of Representatives. I also have a copy of the standing orders of the Senate, having been a senator, as you said. And I think, everyone should know what these documents say. because sometimes we see the comments coming out, and sometimes these comments come out of a place of not knowing what the standing order says. And it's interesting that, standing order number 40 came out in the budget debate. But I want to preface my comments on what transpired, paying particular attention to the fact that the Speaker of the House is in charge of the House. So there are standing orders, yes. He will not breach the standing orders, but there are opportunities where the Speaker of the House will make a determination based on what prevails in the House at a particular time, so as to observe fairness and transparency and all of that for all members on either side of the chamber. So I want to say that, right? And I know we're hearing, oh, the speaker might be biased, and the speaker is this, and the speaker is the other. I also want to say that if we go back into history, we will notice that all of the speakers that were before had some sort of alignment to a political party. And I wish to point out here the former speaker. Do we remember who was the former speaker? Right?
That was are you referring to Mr. Pear? He was
right, and Mr.
Speaker,
Pear,
yes.
Mr. Michael Pear, right? And before that, I believe it was Lawrence Joseph.
Yes.
Yes. And if we search through the annals of history, we would see that these speakers technically do have alignment with certain political parties. Mm-hmm. So to say that the Speaker of the House is being biased to one side and not the other, from where I sit, I do not see that. I see the Speaker, and now in direct reference to what happened, was being transparent, was trying to give every member of the House an opportunity to speak. He took the recess, and based on his explanation when he came back into the House, yes, he explained that he reached out to both members of the House who had not spoken as yet. The Prime Minister came into the chambers. The member for St. George Northwest did not come into the chambers at that time, right? He allowed the Prime Minister to take the floor and to make his presentation. So I am a bit challenged here at the call for the Speaker being biased and so on, when in fact he took a recess, clearly went out, had a conversation with both representatives, and came back into the House and explained what had happened and proceeded.
Well,
so Kellen,
yes, but I think, and we do have your former Senate President here, Mr. Chester Humphrey, who will be joining the conversation shortly. But of course, I think the point needs to be made that this is, again, the conclusion that the Speaker is biased is not based only on this particular sitting of the House. In fact, former Senate President Chester Humphrey has observed, and again, he has sit in the chair of adjudication, that the Speaker, over time, during his current tenure, has not been playing the role of a neutral umpire. And in as much as you come from a particular political background, once you are sitting in that chair, it becomes a role where you are a neutral arbiter, respecting both sides and taking on the roles and the contentions of both sides of the House.
I agree with you, Kellen. I agree, but I can only speak to what I have observed. Yes. And I have not attended all of the parliamentary sittings. Mm-hmm. I was present for the closure, the last session of the budget debate. I was mm-hmm. present. I can only speak to what I have experienced and what I have observed. Maybe former president of the Senate, Chester Humphrey, might have been following all of the sittings. I cannot mm-hmm. say that I have been following all of the sittings, so I can only mm-hmm. speak from my place.
From your personal experience.
All right.
And yes, please, I didn't mean to cut your train of thought, but I do intend to bring in Senator Humphrey, former Senator Humphrey, your colleague there, in a second. But is there anything else you wanted to add on that opening gambit there in
No,
respect of the role of the Speaker?
I anticipate the entry of
There you go. Well, Senator, good morning, former Senator Humphrey. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Bub Report, sir. Again, your audio is a bit low there. Are you able to remove the headphones? Because we can't seem to hear you. We're getting a lot of background noise. So we're going to put you backstage for a bit there, because we can't seem to hear you very, very well. I'll have my producer reach out to you, sir. But Senator, let us now continue. Let us talk about the role of Standing Order 40, specifically here in how debates are conducted in the House about who is supposed to close motions, who is supposed to open motions, the role of government business in all of this.
Right. So
the leader of government business, that is.
The leader of government business.
Yes.
So again, I believe Standing Order 40 was read in the House, and it is clear, Kellon, that this is a budget debate, right? So we expect, and according to the standing orders, the Minister for Finance, in presenting the said estimates in his budget, may speak for as long as he wishes. This is the first. So the Minister for Finance would usually, yes, present the budget. So the Minister for Finance spoke, and all other members will speak, right? The Prime Minister gets as much time as the Minister for Finance, or 2 hours, whichever is longer. And again, this is based on the standing orders, right? This is Standing Order 40. I'm still reading from that. All other members will get 1 hour. I think that the area for contention as presented in the House was subsection 5. And that section reads that the minister finally concluding the debate, whether the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, or any other minister designated by the Prime Minister may speak for 1.5 hours in addition to his earlier speech on the budget if he had already so spoken. And I think this is where the contention is.
Yes, right. So this is so let us talk about this, because when the finance minister, the member of parliament for St. Patrick East, stood up and he started debate on the motion, the impression that, again, as someone who covered parliament, because of course he opened debates on the budget, is that he would be closing debates on the budget. What should have been the speaker's role in that very moment?
So again, Kellon, I think based on my knowledge of what happens in the parliament, there would be a speaking order.
Yes.
Right? Both sides are aware of the speaking order. So if the speaker realizes that, there is a move away from the speaking order, let's call it that, it is within his right to call the member on the floor to the bench to find out what is going on. Right? And I believe that was done. The member returned, and apparently there must have been some miscommunication or something. The speaker then called the member again and had a recess to ensure that the procedures that were previously agreed on is upheld. And again, this is me sitting in the parliament looking at it, right? I was not privy to all of the information that either the speaker or Minister Cornwall or the member for St. George Northwest had. I'm just looking at what happened in the parliament while I was sitting there. And again, the speaker taking a recess, asking for a recess, is well within his rights.
Right. So the recess occurred. The recess occurred. Following the recess, Parliament resumed. It was at that moment that the member for St. David entered the chamber. Yes. However, members of the opposition were still not in the chamber. Yes? And then it was at that point that the member for St. David, now tell us what occurred there, because the member for St. David stood up and was about to make his contribution to the debate. Obviously, he did not make his contribution yet. So should the speaker have given him the opportunity again to then, after making his contribution, to also close the debate, as opposed to allowing the members for St. Patrick East, that is, to continue his contribution?
So again, Kellen, the standing order allows the Prime Minister to close the debate.
To close the debate, okay.
The standing order allows the Prime Minister to close the debate. And this is what the Speaker explained when he came back into the House. So the Speaker, based on the prevailing circumstances, made as you would say, a judgment, right? That both persons had not spoken. He had a speaking order. He went out, took a recess, had a conversation apparently with both of the members, came back in, explained what had happened. Then the member for St. David said, well, he is willing to, wait for the member for St. George.
For St. George Northwest, because of course, Dr. Mitchell did not contribute to the debate. I was curious about that. Well, first of all, why was he not there? Why was he not there to contribute, or to represent his constituency in that moment? That was a curiosity to me as well. But please proceed.
I have that curiosity as well, and
Yes.
I'm taking it from being the facilitator for the National Youth Parliament. I had youth parliamentarians in the House, and one turned around and quizzically looked at me and said, well, what is going on? This is not what's supposed to be, because I actually teach the youth parliamentarians from the real standing orders before we get into the standing orders for the youth parliament, so they are aware of what is supposed to happen, right? So the member for St. David came in, and the speaker said to the House, here is what happened. I took the recess, went out, did this, came back in. The member for St. David is here. The member for St. George is not here. We are going to allow the member for St. David to make his contribution, at which point, sometime during the presentation, the member for St. George came in, right? Again, it is the speaker's determination, judgment as to how to proceed. I remember clearly that the member for St. David indicated that he was willing to give way so that the member for St. George could make his contribution. So I am saying all of this outside of knowing what the conversation was outside of the chambers when the speaker took the recess.
Let's see if we can bring back former Senator Chester Humphrey. Mr. Humphrey, can you hear us clearly, sir? Now.
Yeah, I can hear you. I didn't know what the challenge is on your side.
Yeah, your sound is very low for some reason. I'm not too sure what's happening.
Well, this is volume.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Yes. Let's see what we can do here. We'll keep working with you, sir, because we do have to get your contribution, which is valuable. But we also have to make the point, former Senator, that the Prime Minister was also out of the chamber for most of the debate. So I think in fairness to both sides, we also have to make that point. Yes, Dr. Mitchell was out, but it was only after, I suppose, the Speaker went to seek them out. But here, there ought to be a responsibility for members to be in the House at all times, yes?
I love that you raised that. I love that you raised that comment, Kellon, because this is the people's business. But yes, members, I remember myself being absent. And the procedure for being absent from the chamber is that you would inform the Speaker. So again, remember I started this, that the Speaker is in charge of the chambers. Whether we like his political affiliation, whether we like him as a person, whatever our belief or thoughts about the Speaker is of no importance when it comes to the office of the Speaker of the House. He is in charge of the House. So if as a member you're going to be absent from the House, and this is based on my training, you indeed have to say to the Speaker that you will be out of the House, whether it's out for the entire session, whether it's out for a period. You do need to say to the Speaker that you're going to be out. So I am assuming that both members might have indicated, I do not know, I'm assuming that both members would have indicated to the Speaker that they would be out for a period. If they are indeed in the chambers and have to leave, the standing order does allow for a member to move from the chamber, holding the decorum, exit the chamber, and come back into the chamber whenever he or she is finished with whatever that person needs to deal with.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if that
and we also have a curious question. Someone is saying, no, this is not the question. Tessa Barry, another Tessa, no relation, yes? Dr. Tessa Barry as well, is saying, I was confused when Minister Cornwall continued speaking after approaching the Speaker. What was said that allowed Minister Cornwall to continue?
Well,
obviously you don't know. We don't know. But as a curiosity, he went to the Speaker and then he continued speaking.
Right.
What if you were an adjudicator in that moment? Would you have allowed Minister Cornwall to continue speaking, or would you have called for an indefinite recess at the Speaker's discretion if you were in his position, given the context in which the Speaker said, well, the member for St. George Northwest is not there, the member for St. David is not there, he was not in Parliament, we have to be fair. A lot of them were not there. What would you have done in that situation? Would you have adjourned for the day?
Okay, you're putting me in a very compromising situation here.
Well,
because clearly I'm not the Speaker. So the Speaker would, again, I'm saying that based on the prevailing circumstances, the Speaker would make a determination. I cannot speak to what the Speaker was thinking. I cannot speak to what Minister Cornwall had said, what the conversation was.
Yes.
But clearly there must have been some sort of miscommunication, right? Because the Minister Cornwall went back and then the Speaker called him again. And then the recess was taken. So that part of it, I think it appears as if there was some miscommunication, to which the Speaker responded by taking a recess to clarify what was happening. And again, that was well within his role. Sometimes we look at these matters and we look at them through colored lenses instead of looking at them objectively. It is a very difficult situation to, I'm using difficult loosely, to manage that kind of robust discussion that is happening in the House.
Right.
And so to appear to be fair to everybody, sometimes the Speaker will consult with the clerk, and sometimes the Speaker will take a recess, or sometimes the Speaker will adjourn the sitting, and then things are put into proper perspective again and return to the chambers.
So none of this would have happened if members were in fact present in the chamber. Yes? Would you agree that this might not have happened if members were present in the chamber? Potentially. Folks, member for St. David, member for St. George Northwest, members of the opposition, please be present. I'm not the Speaker, I'm just saying, yes.
We cannot make a blanket statement because we do not know if either member, St. George Northwest or St. David, had indicated, because you would also know,
because you did mention that they have to give excuses as well.
Right. And during the debate, I had actually seen notes being passed to the Speaker. So I cannot say that they did not indicate that they would be out of the chamber for a period of time or not. So yes, I would agree with you, considering or bearing in mind that they may have indeed given a notice that either of them might have been out of the chamber.
Let's get to another comment. I'm not excusing the behavior of the opposition. I don't agree with the walkout. However, I've watched both the upper and lower house, and Ms. Decima Williams seems to have a greater grasp of the Senate upper house through knowledge and chairmanship than what we see in the lower house, House of Representatives. As a citizen, I'm fed up with the Movelang in the lower house. There is always also again, in the Westminster tradition of parliamentary democracy, that the upper house always appears to be this quote-unquote rarefied space. Speak to why that is. Is that a holdover of what happens in the British House of Commons that we have inherited, that in the lower house you always have, again, common quote-unquote behavior as opposed to the upper house? Speak to that, please, because, again, the quality of debate in my observation over time, having covered Parliament for many years in Grenada, has been much more collegial and in a way scholarly in a way.
Right. And I agree with you. I think it goes back to, as you say, maybe the Westminster system, but it also goes back to our Caribbean politics. And when we get into the House, sometimes, you know, the robustness of the discussion, the debate takes on, you know, a different light. Let's put it that way. In the Senate, we are appointed and we are expected to behave in a particular way based on that appointment, right? So even from my experience in the Senate, I remember Chess having to pull me up once, and I smiled. I looked at the note and I smiled, and I said to myself, well, okay, but I cannot, while I don't agree, I ought not to make this an opportunity for debate. And this is what we're seeing happening, right? And again, I'm speaking to this objectively. We stand on points of order. We stand on points of clarity. I heard the leader of the opposition stand on a point of principle. And then the speaker had to say, well, based on the standing orders, there is nothing called a point of principle. And then she said clarity. And then he said, well, you can't be standing on a point of clarity for this. It has to be a point of
order. Yes, and the speaker also made that point. But
no, I'm just saying that in this situation, the speaker was very lenient. In another chamber across the Caribbean, that speaker might have said to the leader of the opposition, please resume your seat, because clearly we have to know what you're standing on, and there is no principle. You cannot stand on a point of principle or a point of clarity. It's a point of order. So I think the speaker was very lenient in trying to be fair to everybody and all of that. But that's my take.
Yeah.
I remember since Chess is hearing me now, I remember Chess pulling me up on the length of my jacket. Yes. and I smiled, and I did not, as I said, there is no way or no matter where a member in the House should be engaged in this kind of back and forth with the speaker, and Chess knows that to be true. You do not use a point of order as an opportunity for debate. You state your point of order and you resume your seat. And cardinal sin number one for me in the Parliament is having an argument with the speaker. The speaker is in charge of the House.
The speaker, ultimately, irrespective of what we think about the umpire, he is the umpire. Yes, Mr. Humphrey, good morning, sir. I hope you can hear us better now when we can hear you.
Yes, good morning.
Yes, all's well that ends well. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I don't know why we have this problem each time I'm coming on your program. There's always some issue. Because I switch computers to get around the problem that we had in the last occasion. I know you're saying that you're not hearing me.
But now we can hear you loud and clear.
Well, because I'm using my phone.
Yes, and that's fine. I'll definitely have my producer make a visit to you. We may have to do a site visit to look at your technology. But again, Mr. Humphrey, welcome to the conversation. Again, we were speaking here of both the conduct of the speaker and the responsibility of the members to be present in Parliament. And we came to one of the conclusions that perhaps if members were present, that maybe that might not have occurred. Of course, Dr. Sensei is also making the point that maybe members might have issued excuses for not being there as well. So I want you, in a nutshell, Mr. Humphrey, as former Senate President, if you were in the Speaker's chamber at the close of the debate, what would your approach be in treating with what occurred in Parliament, what we saw occurred in Parliament at the end of the debate?
First of all, the fundamental problem from my observations of what is occurring in the House
I think we lost you there.
is the lack of knowledge of the rules.
Yes.
Now, an umpire, like an examiner, and Dr. Sincere will be familiar with this because she is in academia, you can't examine the students if you yourself don't know your subject matter. And that's the crux of the problem here. Because firstly, and I'll deal with the behavioral aspects because that's a separate issue but entwined in it. And I've made my views on both component parts of the problem known. And I will repeat. Firstly, if the speaker had knowledge, and the speaker must have knowledge of the absence, first and foremost, of the Prime Minister during the debate on the budget, that the Prime Minister would be absent from the chamber. He must have knowledge of that. It is his responsibility to inform the House, because no matter whether it's the Minister of Finance presenting the budget, essentially, this is the budget of the Prime Minister because he's head of cabinet. The buck stops with him. It is his budget. And if he's going to be absent from the House, and one could expect this to happen to a Prime Minister because he has many duties to perform, and some of these duties may be emergency matters that arises during the process of a debate, the Speaker has to make that announcement. The Speaker has to say, honorable members, I wish to inform that the Prime Minister will either be temporarily absent from the House or the Prime Minister will depart and come back to the House because he's attending to other matters of state. So that the whole House is aware. I mean, it had become so embarrassing that even the Minister of Finance was not aware as to what was happening. Because the Minister of Finance, as is the normal course of things when you move a motion, the mover of the motion presents the motion, outlines the broad ambits of the motion, its objectives, its reasons, etc., and he presents that motion, and then he sits and the debate ensues. When everyone has spoken, the mover of the motion, in this case it was the Minister of Finance, gets up and winds up the debate. But because the Speaker failed to inform the House of the absence, when the Minister of Finance got up, as is normal in other motions, there was a brief intermission with the Speaker calling the Minister of Finance to the table. And thereafter, some adjournment took place. I can't recall all of the sequences. But the fact is, it was very obvious to the nation that the Minister of Finance was not aware of his surroundings. And that's a fact. Else he would not have commenced. Now, under Rule 40, the Prime Minister does have the power under Rule 40. But let me go back to Rule number 5, not Rule number 5, because the Speaker is seriously wanted.
Senator Tessa, Rule 5. Sorry, I always call
Rule
former
5.
members
The
Rule 5. Rule
speaker
5
is
says.
seriously wanted. Rule 5, subsection 5. The speaker shall be responsible for the management and general administration of the House. And this is what I'm saying. The speaker must have known, or the speaker should have known, that the prime minister will be absent from the chamber from time to time. And the speaker should be in a position to know why the leader of the opposition was absent from the chamber. No. And again, it all boils down to the fundamentals of respect. If a member is going to exit the chamber, the member does so, and if he's going to exit for an extended time, he sends the presiding officer a note, right? But as I said to you, the Minister of Finance was embarrassed because he was not aware, and I'm certain that the Speaker was aware, because when the question will arise, I don't know, I don't have the hardcore evidential facts, but circumstantial common sense tells me when the Minister of Finance got up to wind up the debate, because he was the mover of the motion, and that is the normal process that happens. He has the final say. It is clear he was not aware that the Prime Minister was coming back in the chamber. And even more importantly, it would appear that he was not aware that the Prime Minister is going to wind up the debate. Now, if the Speaker had that information, the Speaker should have made that information known to the House. Now, when the Prime Minister got in and Rule 40 was invoked, and Dr. Mitchell got back in the chamber, I do not know whether or not the Speaker had knowledge of the absence of Dr. Mitchell from the chamber, but again, the whole question of respect, the whole question of just common manners that we learn at home, we practice it in the schools. When you're going to be late for school, you bring an excuse, right? And Senator Claire knows that's how we operated in the Senate, right? If you're going to be late, you call the clerk and say, Mr. Clerk, could you please convey to the Speaker that I'll be late? So the Speaker has knowledge. If you're going to leave early, you send the Speaker a note, you bow to the chair, and then you leave gracefully. That is what is required in the House. That is the quorum of the House. Bowing to the chair doesn't mean you're bowing to the Speaker personally. You are bowing to the authority that the chair carries and the symbolism of the chair. It is totally out of order to challenge the Speaker in the way in which Dr. Mitchell challenged him. And I say this without fear or favor. It's unbecoming. And that's not the way it should be done. But again, the Speaker, look, presiding in the House is both an art and a science. The science is the knowledge part of the rules. The art is how you come across as an individual. If you come across as a rambunctious individual and your body language is hostile, and your body language is, look, when I talk, no dog bark. And I will give you examples of what I talk about. Dr. Sincere will tell you, Senator Sincere will tell you that in the Senate, during the debate, every member speaking has an additional 15 minutes at the discretion of the presiding officer. But because I appreciate the importance, the most important event on the calendar of events of the Parliament is the presentation of the debate on the budget. The presentation of revenue and expenditure, moved first by a motion and then followed up into law, is one of the most important activities. And because I recognize that, and because I recognize that the Parliament is a house of the people, and it is from the House that the people get to understand what their business and how their business is being treated and taken care of. I begin every session of that debate by simply pointing out that every member has in the case of the House the 15 minutes. It
Yes.
is automatic because of the importance as a presiding officer, my internalization of the importance of the exercise to the nation. Because the budget affects every aspect of life of the citizen. They may be involved in taxes, it may be involved in removal of taxes, it may be involved
Yes.
in the introduction of the processes, it may involve expenditure in different areas as it has to be. And therefore,
Yes.
but then this speaker, you have 10 minutes more. And the speaker, I think, if I'm not mistaken, told the prime minister is 7 minutes. Really? Really? The speaker is exercising the discretion as a big bad bully in order to prove himself that I am the man.
Well, yes,
Rather
Mr.
than
Humphrey,
taking an approach,
Mr.
I'm
Humphrey,
saying, and
yes,
this is
quickly
why I've
wrap
said.
up that point. Stick a pin because we have to get to Tessa here. Tessa, I do want you to respond again earlier before
Let me come back to 40
Mr.
because there's an
Humphrey.
important thing in
Yes,
40 that I
Mr.
think the
Humphrey,
senator
yes.
is missing here.
Hold
Sorry.
on, Mr. Humphrey. Hold
Okay.
on. Let's get Dr. Tessa to respond here. Again, in the earlier part of the conversation, Tessa, we were speaking to, again, just the role of the speaker and questions about his role as an umpire here. You've heard what your former Senate president said here about this particular conduct, and then we will get back to what he wants to articulate about an addition to Section 40. But is there anything else you wish to piggyback on or rebut?
Not really. I cannot make a judgment. I cannot make an evaluation as former president has made, because I would just look at the standing orders and what should happen. So to say that, the speaker is behaving in that rambunctious and meaning to, stamp his authority and so on, I will not get into that kind of conversation, but I will definitely speak to what is in the standing orders here. And yes, the speaker is in control, is in charge, and former president is correct when he highlights standing order number 5, was it?
Yes, standing order 5, yes.
Presiding in the House. But we must all, you see, it is kind of difficult to take one standing order and deal with it outside of the other standing orders. So the standing orders must be looked at as an entity together, because one applies in a situation, but there are other things that need to be applied in that particular situation as well. For example, I draw attention to standing order, rules of order 43 and 44, responsibility for order in the House and what constitutes order in the House. Because that subsection 1 of 44 says the speaker or the chairman in committee, after having called the attention of the House or the committee to the conduct of a member who persists in irrelevance or tedious repetition, yes, either of his own arguments or of the arguments used by other members in debate, may direct him to discontinue his speech and resume his seat. The speaker attempted to do this a number of times, and it goes back to the respect that that president of the former president of the Senate is speaking to, the respect not of the person, but of the position of that chair, that office that the speaker holds.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
I
yeah,
may,
yes.
Dr.
Yes, Mr. Humphrey, go ahead, please, sir.
If I may, I agree with Senator Sincere in that the rules are all integrated. None completely stand on their own because there's a body of rules that regulates what happens. But I have to beg to disagree with you that your last reference don't really apply in this situation here, because it was not a case of repetitious argument at all. It was a case of, well, from what the opposition side was saying, something that they had not experienced before, and it's pretty unusual. But then again, we have to go back to the rules. And rules 40 is what the Prime Minister um, used in order to assert his right to speak last. And he has such a right to come back again to the Speaker. Because you see, the administration of rules is not simply a nuts and bolts matter. As I said to you before, it's both the science and the art, the way in which one conducts his deportment, right? So if you come into, I described it earlier in the following way. The speaker sees himself as a lion tamer, and he sees Dr. Mitchell as the lion, and he has a duty to tame him. And the lion thinks, of course, he's the king of the jungle. So you know, and you know, as the king of the jungle, he has entitlements beyond everybody else. Now, when Prime Minister Mitchell, the member for St. David, invoked the power under 40, right? I want to submit that the invocation of such a power should have been announced to the House before. When the mover of the motion moved the motion, he should have said, I wish to inform the House that under Standing Order 40, the Honorable Deacon Mitchell shall wind up the debate. So there will be no clear expectation, as I'm saying. And also, I'm coming back to this point again, and it all comes back into the lap of the Speaker. Now, I don't expect Senator Sincere will exercise the liberty that I'm exercising, because she may have other disciplinary infrastructure that she has to comply with. I have no such restriction.
I disagree with
I
you,
have no such restriction. So I'm speaking straight. And this is what I'm saying.
And
The
and
speaker
she
must have
disagrees, but
known.
go ahead. Yes.
Well, the speaker must have known that that the prime minister will be away from the house from time to time. But no announcement of that was made. So the speaker was failing in his duties.
We're not contending that. We're not contending
Right,
that.
right,
What
right.
I'm saying
So
is that when he came back in, he did give an
Senator, an
explanation.
intervention. Yeah, go ahead,
no, but
Senator.
this question arises. The following question arises under 40. And because the speaker doesn't know the rules, he's unable to guide himself and the House. Because although 40 gives the Prime Minister the right to rebut, the question would arise is this. Given the fact that the process of rebuttal had already started before the House became aware of the intentions of the Prime Minister to rebut, is that process reversible to allow the powers under 40 to take place? And there is what the law calls it a lacuna. But Rule 40 doesn't answer that question at all. But it's a very important question. Remember, everything is on process. The process of the rebuttal had started when twice, I'm told, the Minister of Finance got up to wind up the debate. Right? The question therefore arises under 40. Can the Prime Minister exercise the powers under 40? Will the process have been started? And I think that's what created the confusion. Now, when Dr. Mitchell came, again, he wasn't rules based, right? I thought that when the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Eminent Place, stood up, because I was following on television, I thought she had a sense of something because she began to speak. And I thought she was going to raise the question of whether or not the process having started, whether or not the Prime Minister powers under 40 could still be applied. Now, because that issue is silent, what the Speaker had to then do was to, as we say in an integrated way, is just simply say, Dr. Mitchell, I would advise you to read rule number 5 of the standing orders. And rule number 5 of the standing orders makes it clear. Subsection 6 of 5 says, and I read, and I quote, The decision in all cases for which these standing orders do not provide shall lie within the discretion of the Speaker and shall not be open to challenge. No. If Dr. Mitchell was aware of that rule and the Speaker was aware of that rule, we could avoid this fracas that took place. Because all the Speaker simply had to say, I exercise my power in respect of 40 to allow the Prime Minister to proceed to wind up the debate because the 40 is silent on whether or not the process of rebuttal is reversible. Because the standing order is not, doesn't speak to that at all. And I would submit, I would submit that it will be quite a challenge. But the Speaker has the authority to make a ruling. And not to make the ruling under 40. He can't make that ruling under 40. He has to make that ruling under 5. But the Speaker is not aware of the rules.
But
So having been told by the member for St. David, who's a lawyer, well, look, I coming back and speak and I could do it under 40. He just parroting. Could I read 40? Could I read 40? But 40 doesn't answer the question. What answers the question is 5. Because under 40, a question arises.
Yes, on a point of order.
You want to rise on a point of order?
Mr. President, on a point of order. Can I rise on a point of order, please? An intervention for former Senator Tessa here, please.
Yes, and thank you very much, Dr. Bob. Because what Senator Humphrey is saying is exactly, I was sitting there. He may not have said it in those exact words. When the recess finished, the Speaker came back in and he made a pronouncement to the entire House. He did. I was sitting in the chamber. So whether he was aware that 40 should not have been used or 6 should have been used, the fact is 6 gives him that authority to allow the member for St. David to speak without challenge, without challenge. And understanding orders also give an opportunity for appeal. If you decide or you think that the way in which the Speaker adjudicated the matter was not satisfactory, there is a procedure in here for dealing with that. So we go back to 6.
Agreed.
So we go back to 6. Without challenge, the Speaker stood up, made a determination, and said, okay, I am going to, and I hear all that, what you are saying, Senator Humphrey. I'm hearing everything that you're saying. And perhaps this is an opportunity for the standing orders, the current standing orders committee, to take a look at this and to do some improvements. Because as it is now, I don't think except for that change that we made when I was in the Senate under your leadership, Senator Humphrey, where we introduced the use of electronic devices in the House. I don't think any of these standing orders have been changed, modified for quite a while. So perhaps this is an opportunity for the standing orders to be reviewed. And
right, agree.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Humphrey. Yes.
Agree. And may I conjoin your appeal by saying it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I mean, the Prime Minister, a member of St. David, was on his feet explaining some important developmental issues to the nation. Right? And he was just kind of had to cut off. I mean, how do you know, Senator doesn't say that in the House of Representatives, on any ordinary bill brought before the House, you are limited to 15 minutes? Could you imagine that? In my chamber, there's no such limit. I will deal with you under the rule of repetition. But but I can't understand it. I can't understand how the House limits representatives to speak on bills, laws which are going to be introduced to govern your life, and all you're allowed is 15 minutes. So there must be a thorough overhaul. I agree with you. I'm conjoining with you on this one. A thorough re-examination. And I'm not looking for work, but if people believe that I can make a contribution, I am available to do so without fear or favor. When it
Well,
comes to the conduct of the business of Parliament, I don't have political sides. I
Right. So,
said to before that that the conduct of Dr. Mitchell in the House is despicable. And who wants to be upset with that?
well,
That's their
well,
business.
yes. Well,
This is a
Mr.
display
Humphrey.
that the nation sees.
Well,
And
Mr. Humphrey,
I've made the point
Mr.
that the time has come. The time has come because not all the rules that need to be changed, but the speaker must make himself conversant with the rules. You cannot be an umpire in a game. You cannot be a judge. You cannot be an examiner if you don't know the subject matter. And that is it. That is the fundamental problem that
but Senator
this
Humphrey,
parliament faces.
Yes, Mr.
I
Humphrey,
cannot
stick a
join with
pin.
you.
Tessa, go ahead, please.
I cannot join with you on that because in this particular space,
I
we're
wasn't asking you to.
no,
Let her finish, please, Mr. Humphrey. Let her finish.
this particular space, we are actually speaking about that standing order 40 and what happened at the budget debate. Before you came in, I had explained to Kellon, well, I do not look at all of the sittings, so I cannot say that the speaker does not know. I cannot make a determination of whether he's knowledgeable or ignorant of the standing orders. What I can speak to is standing order 40 and those that are linked to it in this particular circumstance. And based on my observation of having sat there looking at what happened, I saw firsthand what happened. And Senator Humphrey, you would agree with me that and I'm not, this is an objective observation. The members of the opposition walked in, walked out, walked in, walked out of the House. So if we are there to discuss the budget, as you say, it's a very important. That's what I started this conversation with Kellon with, the importance of the estimates of revenue and expenditure, right? We ought to take this as a serious discussion, a serious debate. We ought to take the Parliament as a place where serious business happens. And you're correct. When I was in the Senate under your leadership, Senator Humphrey, we could not have gotten away with those things. We could not. But I cannot speak to the speaker's knowledge or of all of the standing orders and so on. I can speak to what happened at the budget, the closing of the budget debate. He came in after the recess, he made a pronouncement, and he went ahead to let the member for St. David speak. And if we are going to invoke, whether the correct standing order was invoked or mentioned or not, the speaker does have the power on the standing order number 6 to allow the member for St. David to speak, to make any determination without challenge. And if a member wants to challenge a decision, the standing orders provide for doing so in a respectable manner. And that is my contention. The House must have order. A member ought to be
The decorum. A certain level of
Yes.
decorum in the House is required. Otherwise, we will degenerate into what you see there. What you see there. And you know, we have to, as leaders, be responsible. I saw a video making the round in which a police officer was forced to arrest a young lady. And he had more than probable cause. And this is because people have come to believe that the way to behave is any way you feel. And that is so sad when we as leaders who should be setting the vision, and the world now has become very visual. In the old days, you couldn't see things. Now the world is a visual place. Everything is seen. And so how we conduct ourselves right, is important. And again, I must add, on finally on this thing, it's important as to how the presiding officer conducts himself.
Mhm.
Because you remember, you need to draw respect. You need to get people to respect you. And therefore, to get them to respect you, you must carry yourself in such a manner. And you must avoid unnecessary antagonism. I have never ordered a member to sit down. I've just said, I've just said to the member, could you please spend a moment and read standing order A, B, C, D, E, F, G? I have never thumped my chest. I am the speaker. When I speak, no dog bark. Sit down. You know, when you send these signals by your body language, by your tonal quality, there are multiplicitous ways of communication. There's eye communication, the way in which the tone of your voice, right? The way in which your body, as people said, you know, they can read your body language. All of these things are important when you are charged with the responsibility of doing certain things. Now, if you see the way judges operate, anytime a judge makes a decision, he grounds it someplace in the rule that you can refer to. And I'm saying if the speaker was knowledgeable of the rules, he would have discovered that the question which had to be answered under 40 was whether or not the process of rebuttal having begun, could it have been suspended? And I'm saying the rule is silent on that. And because the rule is silent on that, the speaker is entitled to make a decision, but then he has to refer to 6. So the speaker now has to point to the House, the entire House, why he's ruling the way he's ruling. I am invoking my powers under 6, and let me read 6 for you, right? You know, but as I said,
Yes,
I don't
and
know.
if we can continue to have this conversation ad nauseum. We really have, but we really have to get to the next segment. I have esteemed, some might call them comrades, waiting in the wind. Two comrades who served in the Grenada Revolution, and of course there was also a Trump supporter who was supposed to join us, but unfortunately on the last minute he declined to appear on the program. But the segment will continue.
Or what? He's ashamed of his ideological complexities, complexion.
That is a question that you might have to ask him, so I can put you in touch
You
with
know, many
Dr.
years
Fuad-Khan.
ago, I learned something, you know. I'm young, gifted, and black. Proud to be black.
Yes,
So if
yes,
he's a Trumpite, he should be proud to be a Trump man.
yes.
I
All
must say he
right.
has taken the wind out of my sail because I was
Yes,
looking
he has.
forward so
I know
much
you were looking
to this
forward to
discussion.
joining that debate. Yes. But
Yeah.
Dr. Tessa, over to you, madam, for some closing comments. And thank you again for appearing on the Bub Report this week.
You're most welcome, Kelon. Thanks for having me. I am going to again call, for regular citizens. This is our business, and we need to know what these standing orders say, whether we're in Parliament or outside of Parliament, because the Parliament regulates our business. So it is in our best interest to know what is said in there, and for us to be able to contribute to those kinds of discussions, because sometimes as a regular citizen sitting outside looking at what is going on, as Senator Humphrey said, the world has become very visual, and without a clear understanding of the standing orders, a couple of people did reach out to me and ask me, what is this, what is happening, should this happen, and so on. We need to know the standing orders. I will say, Kellon, as I always say to the National Youth Parliamentarians, do not take what you're saying in our real parliament as what should necessarily happen. And that is why I actually do my facilitation from the standing orders and not necessarily from what we see happening. So again, this is a call, for regular citizens to be aware of what the standing orders say, and also for us to be able to contribute to meaningful discussion on those standing orders. Also maybe putting out a call that these standing orders be reviewed, because some of them, I mean, things like, dress and so on, that has changed.
Well, yes, so you bring up dress code again, and I'm glad you brought that up, because you said former Senate President Chester Humphrey pulled you up on dress code. Could we speak on that? Because that was an issue that came up in relation to one of the members in Parliament for this budget debate.
I don't think Senator Humphrey remembers, but he received a note, and I saw the receipt of the note, and then he sent me a note, and he said to me, Senator, I am reminding you that the dress code for the Parliament is business attire, which means that your jacket sleeve should be down to your wrist, and mine was a little above. So I was surprised by
so you took that tutelage into consideration.
Yes, I do believe that, because sometimes we're moving away from the colonial, and there are some things that remain. We have removed the wig and so on. Why not review, in our review of the standing orders, review dress code for
dress code as well,
as part of that. Just putting that out there. But I was chastised by Senator Humphrey. Senator Humphrey, I wasn't pleased, but I did not argue with you.
as the presiding officer.
Well, my job is not to please you. I'm the presiding officer. My job is to maintain order and to preserve preserve the decorum of the House. And the decorum of the House is very British, right, until that changes. Just one word of caution. We have a penchant for throwing out bath water, soap, and the whole baby. So we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful. We reach a stage now where even you tell somebody good morning, they rebuke you as being old-timeish. All right. I grew up when you answer a business phone, right? You first announce the place. So if I'm answering the phone and I'm an employee at the Ministry of Labor, I say, good morning, Ministry of Labor. Chester Humphrey here, how can I help you? Not as has happened to me in one of the ministries, not the Ministry of Labor. I call, yes, yeah, yeah. And then she say, okay, sweetheart. No, come on. Not from a business point. All I'm saying is we've got to be careful when we're doing these changes that we don't throw everything out. Right? Otherwise, because we have the tendency. Right. We have the tendency to go towards anarchy. We can see it in the way in which we dress. As I was telling my son growing up in my days of courtship, how neat you had to be to attract a girl. You had to have your hair well groomed. You know what I mean? You had to have your white handkerchief just barely out the side of your back pocket. Your shirt, your pants have to be well ironed and so on. Today, what I see, right? Today, what I see, if that's the standard, boy, we in deep trouble.
Yes. Senator Humphrey, I would indulge you to stay around because we have to get to the next segment. But viewers and listeners, this has been a very important conversation. And I take that call, Dr. Tessa, in relation to having public education on the standing orders. And perhaps we need to have another segment with you and Mr. Humphrey, where we can have, again, not only reacting to what occurs in Parliament in the context of the everyday machinations of Parliament, but having regular public education updates on the importance of the standing order, the role of the standing order in the context of a parliamentary democracy. Yeah, and I hope to get a commitment from both of you to let me finish, please, Ms. Humphrey. I hope to get a commitment from the both of you that is something that you would be willing to do in the future. Yes? Is that a yes?
Senator Humphreys. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I just wanted to make one final point. And that is not, and that is, I have been consistently calling over the years for the return of civics in the schools. And I am only now beginning to understand why the political will has never been exercised and returned that subject in the schools. And it's simply because it's not in the interest of politicians for people to understand the processes. It's in the
Yeah.
interest of politicians to keep people ignorant. So our constitution, which governs, is the fundamental of all laws. Our parliament, which is a very important institution in the governance of the state. The average citizen know absolutely nothing about them. And as an educator, I would want you to put that in part of your list of demands in the changes that you seek to make in the education system. That the citizens be taught from birth about the importance, the role of parliament, how it functions, why there's a parliament, how people are expected to behave, what are the rules.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
when you get to elderly people, they are consumed with how they paying their taxes, how they sending the children to school, how they meeting the groceries in the shop. They have no time to come and sit down and listen to this thing, this dry business called parliament and so on. Right?
Yeah,
So you have to put that information in from young, very
yeah,
young.
Yeah.